Jeff, Emil, thank you for being with us.
It's great to be with you. It's great to be in Cairo.
GE has been here in the country for the past more than 40 years now. You've met President Sisi yesterday. What were you talking about?
So really trying to connect three things. Trying to connect, really, we're a big industrial and infrastructure company. So working on electricity projects, locomotive projects, healthcare, things like that. Trying to match that with financing. So how do you get global export banks, G financing, things like that. And then the third is how do you, if you do both those things, how do you create local jobs? So how do we build kind of an industrial base for Egypt? And I think today, if a company can connect those three strains, which are kind of technical solutions, financial solutions, and job creation, that's kind of a solution for a country like Egypt. So that was what I was discussing with the president yesterday.
But were you talking about specific projects?
Very specific. So on the electricity side, there's an interest to diversify away from just natural gas. So wind projects, clean coal projects. And then one of the unique opportunities in Egypt is the existing power plants aren't efficient enough. They're old. So how do you raise the efficiency of what's already in the ground? And that requires both software and controls and new technology. So that's on the power side. Locomotives, there's a need for probably 400 locomotives. How do you get into a substantial kind of locomotive project? How do you get power to the regions that need it? So that's kind of an electricity distribution. Oil and gas, you know, as the fields get developed, what kind of technical support's required there. So there's probably 4 or 5 businesses inside GE, all of which have applicability in Egypt right now.
I know you're also interested in the Suez area.
Yes.
And the industrialization there.
Yeah.
What is your interest in that?
So again, I think the development of the trade zone in Suez will probably be where we locate a factory to develop these products. But we look at Egypt in terms of the geography as being either a place where you can serve Africa from, which is a very big opportunity for us, or looking at the Middle East, which is another big opportunity for us. So the geography really does matter. Egypt is in a good position, so we think that's a potentially good place to invest as well.
Financing is one of our biggest problems in Egypt. Egypt is not a rich country. It's rather a middle income, tending to a poor country. So what are your suggestions for that?
You know, again, I think because we have connections around the world, we can pull together export finance from Europe, possibly from China, even hopefully from the United States. So we can pull together a vast array of different financing capabilities. And in the case of Egypt, look, we're willing to invest off our own balance sheet as well to make sure these projects take place. So, you know, to your point, financing, you know, it doesn't do any good to have the technical solutions unless you can bring a complete package to make them happen in a place like Egypt.
How big is your investment here in Egypt?
You know, right now we have about 600 people. We probably have all told, you know, several $100 million invested. The immediate game plan is to invest probably another couple $100 million around the local capability. That doesn't include financing. These are on hard assets. And then beyond that, I think we'll do some financing here as well. So we're kind of leaning into the region from a standpoint of financial investment.
It's interesting that you mentioned the people before the money.
Very much. You know, again, I think the globalization today, you have to connect all these dots. You have to connect the technical solutions with the financing solutions with the people. And that's the world today. So I think they all come together.
Are you still interested in the oil and gas business with the falling down of the prices?
Look, every business in GE cycles. You know, I took over the company 4 days before September 11th. The aviation business went into a real down cycle. Now it's a great business. So I think one of the things you learn over time is that every business cycles, and actually you have to look at a down cycle as an opportunity, not as a time to cry. And I think that's how we look at the oil and gas. Over the long term, we like the business, and so we keep investing in the down cycle and come out more competitively.
Many of the multinationals complain about some obstacles here in Egypt, especially the foreign currency, the bureaucracy, so many things. What are your problems here in Egypt?
Oh, look, I mean, I think the macroeconomics are challenging right now, right? But I think we can take a longer view. You know, we're financially strong. We have a long-term perspective. Look, we were able to get we were able to get 2.5 gigawatts online in 6 or 8 months, you know, in 2014 and 2015. So when you put your mind to something in Egypt, you can get it done. So I think it's just getting the right financing packages to get the work done. I think that's the biggest challenge. I think there's 1,000 other things going on, you know, and you have to protect yourself from a currency standpoint and things like that. But we have the kind of the scale to take a bet on Egypt right now that maybe other companies don't have or don't want to. But we do.
What kind of profits do you get from this market? I mean,
small today. You know, you look, we're a huge company.
Yeah.
So on a relative, you know, standpoint, to just pick off Egypt, you know, it wouldn't be a major earning source for the company. But I think if you look more broadly at the Middle East and North Africa for GE, extremely important for the company. If you look the region, extremely strategic for the company. If you look at the continent of Africa, both North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, it's been the fastest growing region for GE over the past, faster than China, faster than any place else. So I think what I've learned in my career is to take each market as it comes. You know, we are in 180 countries around the world. A place like Egypt has real strategic opportunity for us if we're patient enough and see, you know, when one door closes, another door opens. And that's just the way you have to globalize.
So where do you see the potential here? You see the potential in infrastructure, you see the potential in power, you see
so here's what I'd say, the market itself needs everything we sell.
Yeah.
So as a market, you know, if some of the financing can get solved, it should be a big market for us in power generation. As let's say as a competitive force, a huge amount of educated workforce in a geographic location that is very strategic. So I think somebody's going to figure out over time ways to create software centers in Egypt, ways to create logistical hubs in Egypt. So it's got a differentiation, size of market, quality of schools, location. I just think people haven't quite capitalized on that yet the way that's possible. So,
but you know, you're competing with German companies as well. Siemens is one of the major companies.
I've never heard of them. What's the name again?
You've never heard of them?
No, so, look, I mean, the world's a... We always have competitors. Oh, for sure. Siemens is a great company. They're a tough competitor. We don't expect, you know, we know there's competition out there, and I think that's okay. It makes us
enjoy them.
It makes us better. It makes us better, you know. But I think it's, you know, our constraints in a place like this country, because the needs are so great, are less competitive as they are the ability to be creative, the ability to bring creative financing solutions. That's really more of the challenge than to see who wins what. It's how do you make the pie bigger? In the case of Egypt right now, it's who's going to be willing to lean into the financing, and who's going to be willing to localize. Really, it's not so much that the GE gas turbine is 63% efficient and Siemens is 62.9%. It's who can solve the complete package. That's who
can get the cheaper financing for us.
Who can solve the problem, who can take the risk, and then I think you complete the cycle by localizing some capability. If you can say, not only did I power the country, but I created this many jobs in the same time, that is the way to win over the long term in a place like Egypt.
You've also met with the aviation minister, and we've had a major crisis with the Egyptian.
Let me just say to all your viewers how badly I feel about this aviation crisis. It's terrible. my heart goes out for all the families and things like that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What have you been talking about regarding? I know you provide engines.
Yes. Yeah.
For which companies? Boeing or?
So we do for both. Yeah. So we have engines on both Boeing and Airbus planes. We have a long relationship with the airline here, so we're mainly talking about business. And then, look, on the crisis itself, here's the challenge at a time like this is, until you really know what happened, it's hard for anybody to be, reflective enough. So I just kind of would urge the people that watch your show just to try to, as hard as it is, just let's all find the truth together. And then, our working with the airline is really along the lines of how do we provide better engines, how do we support their efforts to do service and things like that.
But when you watch the story going on all over the world, what is your first perception? Engine failure or what?
I have no idea. I really, I've been CEO of GE for 15 years, and I've got enough self-confidence now to say I don't know.
Which is a great thing.
It takes self-confidence, so I really don't know, and I just would I really hope to find what really happened. Yeah.
The region, how big is your investment in the region?
It's very big, billions and billions of dollars in the region. In every GE business. So if you think about aviation, people like Etihad, Emirates are big. If you think about oil and gas, Aramco, ADNOC, power generation in Algeria and in Egypt and Saudi and Pakistan, healthcare is huge across, a growing region. So everything GE does, it does in the Middle East and North Africa in a very substantial way. So I think this is this is a very important part of the GE map, right where we're sitting right now.
Can we say the percentage of the region within the GE map? How
big? It's this region in total for us.
Yes.
Is far bigger than China is for us today. If you add up the whole
including
region.
Pakistan, you mean?
Including, all the way, we kind of look at North Africa all the way to Pakistan, really. And it's probably the biggest single region globally.
And do you see a potential of growth in this region?
Oh, sure.
Within all the political turmoil that we're going through?
It's an interesting phenomenon, which is clearly it's a volatile time we live in. But the people need, what we sell. They need electricity. They need healthcare. And in some ways, from a government standpoint, the way to make sure that volatility doesn't happen is to provide the basic infrastructure that people need. So we've never shied away from, we have a big operation in Iraq. We have a big operation in the region. We've never shied away from, the fact that it's a volatile place, mainly because the needs are so big for what we sell.
I've read one of your latest speeches that I think it was in a university, New York University, and I got very intrigued with what you said on the end of globalization and the trend or the new trend of GE to go localized.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So again, I'm 34 years in the company. I kind of grew up in a time of huge global engagements, free trade agreements, big exports from U.S. to other places or Europe to other places. What I would say is our global revenues have never been more important. Our global prospects have never been higher. We completely believe that our revenue is going to continue to be massively outside the United States. But today, you need to have much more of a local context. You have to understand employment. You have to understand financing. You have to understand local marketing solutions that work in Egypt might be different than Saudi, might be different than Abu Dhabi, and have people on the ground that are empowered to make those decisions. So I think we've gone from a globalization that's based on trade to a globalization that's based on localization. And that's just reflecting where the world is today. So I say, the hardest thing for any business leader to do is try to recognize when something you've been taught actually is different than what you see. And then I think what we've tried to do as a company is embrace the power of localization. 5 or 10 years ago, nobody in GE would want to do a multimodality localization factory in Egypt. Nobody. They would say, can't we just ship in from the US? Isn't that easier? Let's just export. And the answer is no. People here need jobs. They need to see them associated with the technology that's coming into the country. We need to be more flexible. We need to adapt our strategies to meet those needs. And so I think whoever sees this pivot are going to be the companies that are more successful in the 21st century.
But also, I can see the trend within GE to go back to its industrial base. Where does this? Where is this?
The two,
reflected?
I think, really fit together. You know, again, I think one is a portfolio strategy where, you know, our assessment is in a slow growth world like the one we're in now, you can only be as broad as you are deep. So we've really narrowed our portfolio to be fundamentally an industrial. We basically are an industrial company, and then the financing we do is financing around GE assets, really. So, and we're very good. We're very deep on that. And then within that, 70% of our revenues are outside the United States.
70%.
7-0. So we become very adept at how do you localize in the countries that are most important as you grow.
So if you divide your portfolio now, what are the percentages?
In terms of
industries, services?
Industrial was, I would say, in some way, shape, or form, industrial is probably 90% of the company. Financial services is the last 10. And then, you know, I joined GE in 1982. 80% of our revenue was in the U.S. 2016, 70% will be outside the United States. So that's the world. You know, I mean, the U.S. is still our biggest market, still an important market, but if you want to be in power generation or aviation, the world is massively different and offers massively new opportunities.
And that's in spite of the forecast for the growth of your industrial sector to be a bit lower than before.
Well, so the growth this year, we think the growth this year, mainly because oil and gas has been down so much, will be 2 to 4%, which on our size is still pretty good. But last year was more like 5%, so it's down a point or two. But over the long term, we're a $130 billion company. Our goal is to grow 5% organically every year, which is more or less $8 billion of net new growth. So you have to be investing in order to make that happen.
What is your forecast for the second half of 2016?
I think we actually think the second half for us of 2016, we think will be quite strong. I think for the global economy, we're just in a very funny time. In other words, the fourth quarter of 2008, the financial crisis, that was a bad time.
Yeah.
I think this isn't as bad.
Isn't as bad.
It's not. But this is just a very slow growth world with a lot of volatility, both geopolitical, capital markets are more volatile. So I think people have just gotten themselves accustomed to slow growth and volatility. And I think with that as a backdrop, only the people that are willing to take risk are going to be the only people that succeed, ultimately. You're not going to get anything handed to you in the world today. You have to go out and create demand. You have to go out and create your own growth. And that's what we've been willing to be quite forceful in that regard.
So what is your expectation for the second half of 2016 in figures of numbers?
Well, we never give that. Even if I were back on CNBC in New York City, I wouldn't give them the specific numbers. We think our organic growth will be quite good, at least 5% in the second half.
2017?
I think we think our growth will continue. Again, in the world we see today.
Even with the slowdown of the oil and gas business?
I think we see a good market for power, a good market for aviation, a good market for healthcare. So probably of our 8 businesses, 5 or 6 are seeing very good growth. And oil and gas, look, if I knew how to predict oil prices, I'd probably be doing something else.
All of us.
So I think we just try to be ready for whatever's around the corner.
For any turmoil.
Exactly.
Well, how do you look at the elections and their effect on the business in the U.S.?
Look, I think we're in a really interesting election cycle. I don't think anybody would have predicted exactly what we see right now. you know, both candidates are running on protectionist platforms. I don't agree with either one of them on that. You know, I think for us, you know, I love my country. I'm an American. I'm a proud American. But I always think we're better off when we face the world, and the world needs the U.S. to have a role in the world. So I don't support either party when it comes to.
But one of them is coming as a president.
You will see one of them be president.
Do you think it's a selling point? It is just a propaganda selling point at this time,
you know,
the protectionists.
I'm just a humble businessman. I'm just here to do it. So you know much more about that than I do. But I think it's, I think in the area of business, the more engagement, the better.
What is your major challenge that you forecast in the coming months or year?
Look, I think it's how do you traverse this slow growth and volatility? I really do. You know, it's like I said, my career now has spanned several decades. You know, the world of, you know, when the global economy, let's say in 2010, was growing by 4 or 5%. Now it's growing barely by 3%.
Yeah.
The difference between a global economy that's growing by 5% and one that's growing at 3% is vast. I mean, so it's, I think for any company, it's how do you grow in a slow growth world? And for us, that means you need to lean into opportunities like Egypt. You can't be like sitting there saying, oh my God, you know, I wish this was different, I wish this was different. You have to come and say, I'm willing to take this much risk, and I think if we execute really well, we'll get this much reward, right? And the way that we need to execute that is to pull together 3 ideas: technology, financing, employment.
And where do you see the challenge in Egypt?
Again, I think it's, in the short term, it's finding the financial solution. I think that is the people are very good. I mean, very good. So the people can get the stuff done. The GE team here is very strong. They can get anything the country needs, we can get it done. The question is, you got to bring that financial solution, and that's what we intend to do.
Mr. Jeff Amir, thank you very much.
It's very nice to be with you.
Welcome to Cairo, and we hope to have you again.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks.